This is the Steve Mazzacane podcast. We'll get going in just 1 second. It is Thursday. I apologize. I was not on yesterday. I forgot to give a heads up. I was at the Knicks game. I know if everybody's watched my feed, they probably have seen that, but Knicks won in overtime, so I was pretty happy about that. But listen, politics is important, but sports is very important, and we have to make sure we make time for that. No, I'm just sorry. I should have done it anyway. Probably should have done it in the car while I was driving in there and had a conversation. But in any event, we've had pretty much every candidate on except for DiNardo. We may have him on. We'll talk to him and figure out a time if we're going to have him on or not. But we've had all the main candidates that impact Brantford and Guilford. There's no point in having Candelora on because he's unopposed. We're considering doing East Haven, but there's no significant race from what I can see anyway there. So I think we're good for candidates so far. If there are more questions, we may have some more back. But today, I think we're going to finish it up with Christine Cohen. Yeah, we're good. Okay. I'll bring her on. Hold on 1 second. Where's the Christine? How are you?
Good. How are you, Steve?
I'm very good. Good to have you on.
Thanks for having
me. On
me.
before. Yeah, you've been on before. This is not your first rodeo, and so it's just a normal conversation about issues that are happening at the Capitol, the upcoming election, what you're seeing, and but first of all, how are you? What's new?
I'm good. It gets crazy this time of year. I'm still a state senator representing, about 100,000 constituents, and still trying to do a lot of work, even though we're not in Hartford. I have a lot of constituent service work that we do. So between that and the election, things are a little bit busy. And my kids, I have a senior in high school getting ready to submit college application in a matter of days. So it's a little bit crazy in my house.
Wait, he's a senior now?
Yes.
So you're a little late to the college game.
He's a senior in high school now. Early action applications are due on November 1st.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, fun.
Yeah.
Let me talk to you about politics a little bit. Your district changed, right? There were some changes to the 12th district.
Exactly.
Where are those changes?
So the state redistricted after the census, determined that the 12th district was a little light on constituents, actually. So when I say I represent 100,000 constituents, it's not exactly 100,000 constituents. I'm actually about 7,000 under right now, which is not within the standard deviation. And so we had to expand the district a bit. There's a lot that goes into redistricting, very tough, and I don't envy the folks that have to go through that process. It is a bipartisan committee that makes these decisions, and the district has expanded. So right now I represent 6 towns: Brantford, Guilford, Madison, North Brantford, Durham, and Killingworth. Durham is my only partial town that I share with Senator Paul Ciccarella of the 34th district. He has a small northwestern corner of Durham, and that is changing. So now North Brantford, a portion of North Brantford, really Northford, is going to the 34th, to Senator Ciccarella. And the 12th district will pick up the shoreline of East Haven, about 5,000 constituents there, and go up into Middlefield at about 2,000 constituents there. So the eastern half of Middlefield split right down vertically down the middle. So now I will be representing, or hope to represent, 8 towns in the 12th district, and now 4 of them will be partial towns.
Okay. All right. But you have all of Brantford.
All of Brantford, all of Guilford, all of Madison, all of.
And our viewers are not just Brantford, but Brantford is still our home base. So that's certainly part of that. Okay. So you're running a race for your 3rd term. What are you seeing as you knock on doors, as you talk to constituents? What are they seeing as the main issues that you're facing, or what are they bringing up when you talk to them at the doors?
I'm Senate Chair of the Environment Committee, so folks really like to talk to me about environment. They know I'm passionate about that, and it is something, especially in the 12th district, not only along the shoreline, but the northern towns are very agriculturally focused, and so there's a lot we talk about with respect to the environment. It's something that is on folks' mind throughout the 12th district. And again, I think me being Senate Chair of the Environment Committee just lends well to those conversations. I do hear from people. It's, we're hearing it across the country right now. We're hearing it a lot across the state, but reproductive freedom is something that folks are concerned about not just women. I hear it from men as well. So I think that's going to come into play in this election season for sure. Healthcare is always something folks talk to me about, and businesses and the economy. Certainly something weighing on everybody's mind right now. We want to make sure that we don't end up in a recession. And well, that's really driven globally and nationally, protections against recession. There's a lot we can do in Connecticut to try and protect Connecticut residents from feeling the impacts of inflationary pressure and a recession.
Okay, so that's a question I have. So one of the steps you took, for example, was you guys put on hold the gas tax for a while. Mm-hmm. It's a twofold issue here. One is you get a temporary break to the cost of gas. The other may be that we're not getting nearly as much money as we should for long-term transportation costs. How do you balance that out? What do you do with that going forward?
Yeah, I think that's something that folks really need to consider, not just, my colleagues in the legislature, but everybody across the state of Connecticut, and understand what the facts are. And the facts are that 25 cents a gallon equates to $1 million a day for the state of Connecticut. That's $1 million that's not being put into our infrastructure, our roadways and our bridges. And so that's a really big consideration when we talk about impact on the state's economy. We want to make sure that we're keeping our roads in good repair. And so, the 25 cents was important relief at a time when we knew that gas prices were going to go through the roof. And we had no idea that to the extent that they would go up. So that's something that is going to be a big topic as we, after the election, what are we going to do about this gas tax exemption? I think, another thing that was important for the Connecticut legislature to put in place was the free bus service. We have not seen ridership to the extent that we're seeing it right now, if ever, in very many years. Ridership is up. It's a fantastic story. It doesn't cost us nearly as much because bus transportation was already so highly subsidized. So that's something we need to think about, is our transportation options, how to provide people with other options, at a low cost. And free bus service, I think, has been well worth the spend in Connecticut.
Do you feel like that's offsetting people driving cars, or are they?
I do. I really do. And I've heard from people that have taken the bus.
That are bypassing a car to take a bus.
Yep.
Okay.
I also think what's important to talk about is train transportation by rail. Right now, our Shoreline East service is not back to where it needs to be, also highly subsidized. So this is something we really need to talk about. Is it the case that if you build it, they will come? It's something, we in the legislature and DOT, we go round and round about, because right now there isn't consistent rail service. And so, especially on Shoreline East. So if you talk to people who are taking the train from Branford or Guilford, they might tell you, you know what, I'm better off driving down to New Haven to hop on the train there, because I know I can get back without a problem. But if I leave my car at the Branford train station or the Guilford train station, am I actually going to be able to get that transfer from New Haven when I want to? And so I think that's something that's going to come up, and we're going to have to talk more about and discuss some solutions, because I do think connectivity is so very important as we talk about growing our economy, growing business, getting people here to the state of Connecticut who want to stay here, raise their families here. We hear more and more from millennials and even the younger generation that that's something that's important to them, good transportation options. And so I think we're going to have to focus in more on bus and rail service and what we're doing for our future there.
I mean, it does seem like we're headed towards a cliff where we have the gas tax break. We also have less cars paying gas tax. We have cars far more efficient than we ever had before. The toll discussion came up and died after many, many fights. The train isn't just subsidized, it's insanely highly subsidized.
Yeah.
Like it's crazy. Where does this end? At some point, fixing roads and trains and rail takes money. Do you have a solution for this? Something you would propose? Something you would look at?
Well, I'm happy to say that our special transportation fund now has a lockbox, so that
Hmm.
the money going into the lockbox, it's, secure. Once we get it into the special transportation fund, it is used for that purpose and that purpose only. So that's really important to recognize. We didn't have that before,
Hmm.
and I think people can feel secure in knowing that those monies will be, in fact, used to work on our transportation infrastructure and improve it. Um, I it's so difficult when we have these discussions. This is what I was saying. We go round and round about this. If you build it, will they come? Because the reason the train tickets are so highly subsidized is because people aren't going the route of rail. And if we can get people on to trains, commuting to their jobs, commuting to and from work or home, or for leisure purposes, then we're not going to need to subsidize those tickets quite as much. If we can get high-speed rail to connect us between New York and Boston, it's a game changer. And so I think it is important to make the investment, the continued investments. It's incredibly helpful when you're talking about business and bringing business here. I'm co-chair of the legislature's bioscience caucus. It's something that the bioscience, life sciences community talks about constantly. They need to be able to get to Boston
Hmm.
quickly and with ease, to that area. And, without the investments here in Connecticut, we're just losing opportunity.
So, talking about transportation, you have picked up more square footage in East Haven.
Yes.
And so the question of Tweed is a significant one. And I do not hide the fact that I am supportive of the expansion of Tweed, but there are groups of people, and it's kind of grown. It was a small group, but it's kind of grown, and people had concerns. Some of that is also morphed into just concerns about environment or other things. Where do you stand on Tweed? What do you feel our approach should be with expansion of the airport?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's been no secret. I am, like I said, the co chair of the Bioscience Caucus. I've been at a number of Chamber of Commerce meetings where this has come up. I'm a small business owner myself. I want to see the economy grow. I want to see transportation connectivity, as I mentioned. And so I have been a proponent of expansion and expanded services. That being said, I'm also chair of the
Hmm.
legislature's environment committee, and I have real concerns. And so I believe that we need to do our due diligence before we just go, tearing down wetlands for expansion and, sending traffic through roads that flood, and talk about what noise pollution does, and talk about air pollution and what sort of offsets there'll be, and what is the long-term strategic plan here from an environmental standpoint. It's the reason I recently sent a letter to the FAA requesting that they do a full environmental impact statement. It just goes a step further than the environmental assessment. It will really tell us what the true impact is from an environmental standpoint, and hopefully provide some solutions or some alternatives that we can take, as we look at the ecosystem that the expansion is bound to impede or affect.
Yeah, well, I actually like the last sentence you said there because it's inevitable that there will be some environmental impacts. The idea that there's going to be none is not something that's possible. All
Yeah.
right, so from a business perspective, transportation's one. My big issue and the issue I hear and leads every conversation when it comes to costs and businesses is healthcare.
Yep.
And Connecticut is the bluest of the blue, we like to say from a state standpoint, a very democratic state. But other states like Massachusetts seem to have done more on healthcare than we have. What is there on the table? What would you propose? Is there discussions taking place that would make Connecticut more healthcare friendly?
Yeah, well, I appreciate this question. It's been one of my passions. I think you know this, and others of my colleagues and constituents have seen me, I think, as a fighter for affordable health care up in the General Assembly. I have been a huge proponent of a public option, allowing for our small businesses and families to buy into the state's healthcare system. We offer it to municipalities. There's really no reason in my mind that we can't take that a step further and leverage our ability to bring down, our ability with the insurance companies to bring down the cost of healthcare. I think it's really frustrating to see the roadblocks to that proposal. We've done a lot of compromise over the years to try and get that to a good place, and that's been really frustrating. I'd love to see
what are those roadblocks? What are we seeing as a roadblock?
Well, the insurance companies are saying that they will lose, jobs will be lost as a result. We are, the insurance capital of the world is Hartford, Connecticut. We have a lot of insurance companies that do employ people across the state of Connecticut, and certainly I'm mindful of that. But I'm also mindful that people are making decisions right now about whether they're going to be able to serve a full meal for dinner or go get an important exam that they need the next day. That is the reality of the situation. I haven't been shy about mentioning that before I took office and went on the state plan, I funded my own insurance, just like many people out there. And I was paying about $33,000 a year before ever seeing a benefit between my premium and my deductible. That's skyrocketed even more since I've taken office. And so that's just not sustainable. And it's not okay for people to continuously be worried about that. So we need to do good for the people of Connecticut. And while I am mindful that there are a lot of jobs that are, these people are employed by insurance companies, I'm not saying we're going to put these insurance companies out of business. I'm saying let's all come to the table, and these insurance companies will work with us through the public option. There are insurance companies that insure us as state employees, and so they're still making money, and we need to make this work for all the people.
One of the biggest.
Go ahead.
One of the things I'm seeing every day, and I work every day with small business, is small business can't compete when it comes to hiring because big business offers benefits they can't come close to, the small guy. Yeah. And that insurance cost gets subsidized by these large companies. The small business, the restaurants can't compete. They can't get staff. They can't get workers. I am at a loss for why this state that calls itself the bluest of the blue hasn't been able to do something for this, especially from an economic development standpoint. The idea that somebody is staying in a job for healthcare benefits when they won't start a business or take another chance or take a risk is amazing. How is this not something that we are pushing in every election around the state right now? Is it just the insurance companies standing in the way?
Yep. By and large, I would say if you want to break it down to its simplest form and reason, I would say that's the case. So we need to do what we can to bring everybody to the table and try to come up with some compromises. I think Representative Scanlon, when he was chairing the insurance committee, he made inroads there and was really trying to bring everybody to the table. But at the end of the day, those dollars fighting the legislation won out, and lobbying dollars against it, and we were still left seeing families struggle as a result of this. So what we're doing in the meantime, in the interim, we're working on prescription drug pricing. We haven't been able to get the importation bill passed either, which I'm also a big proponent of, importation of drugs from Canada to save pricing, increase competition a little bit. But we have been able to pass an insulin cap, which is huge. We need to look at other caps, that will save folks money across the district, across the state. We also just passed a bill on generics so that if there is a new formula by one of the larger companies, they need to share that formula with the generic drug company, thereby allowing a generic offering, hopefully, and saving consumers dollars there. But so we're also working with, pharmacy benefit managers and insurance companies and these drug companies to really come up with some better options for drug pricing as well.
Okay. I can go about on that for a really long time. I've had podcasts about it. I don't understand why this is not an economic development issue. We put this healthcare in this category of social issue, and it's not. It's an economic development issue, and it's preventing a lot of people from investing in businesses and going on your own. That said, I want to talk about an issue that's affecting all the towns in the state, but Branford and Guilford more recently, and that's affordable housing.
Yeah.
And the question has always been on, does this law impact some of our shoreline towns disproportionately? Is there something that could be done to help with that regard and to help local planning and zoning issues? Or would you favor changing that law in any way? Because there's a lot of Democratic pressure to make it more left and more in favor of state over local. Where do you stand on affordable housing? And she just froze. Christine, can you hear me? All right, we just lost Christine. Let's see if she can. Hold on.
Hear me?
You're back now. You're back now.
Oh, we were doing so well there. I'm sorry.
I know you're doing great. All right, I just asked you about affordable housing.
Okay, so you didn't hear any of my affordable housing?
Unfortunately, no.
Okay. I did talk. I was talking for a little while.
I'm sure it was great. I'm sure it was amazing.
So what I was saying is I do think affordable housing is desperately needed in most of the state, in fact. Obviously our urban centers do very well in that regard, probably meeting the requirements under 830G, but there's a very small percentage of towns, as we know, out of the 169 towns that do. We revisited the statute before my short tenure in 2017. There were some tweaks and modifications made to it. And do I think we need to modify it? I think we need to have. I do think, as somebody who represents these towns, we're not accounting for naturally occurring affordable housing out there, right? So these multifamily houses, we do really well in Brantford. In fact, Brantford's the only town in the census that grew out of the 12th district. And I think that is in large part because there is affordable housing in Brantford. And so, I think we need to recognize that and have discussions around, what towns are already doing, what they've implemented, and maybe 830G is a little too restrictive in that regard. But I think we need to be coming together for real solutions to the problem. I think we do need to be talking about transit-oriented development as we talk about increased connectivity and increased rail service, bus service. What are we doing to allow more walkability, bikeability in towns, and where are those people living, and how do they get from here to there? So I think all of these things are very much interrelated. And something that I think we're going to have an ongoing discussion about in the legislature. I do sit on the Connecticut Commission, the Commission for Connecticut's Future and Development, which came out of what's widely known as Desegregate Connecticut, which is about affordable housing. So while I don't sit on the legislature's Planning and Development Committee, I was appointed as one of the environment chairs to sit on this commission. And the work of the commission has been really interesting. It's been broken into subgroups. I chair the sewerage subgroup, very sexy, the topic of sewerage. But I'm learning a lot. It is one of the roadblocks to development. And, if we want to see more affordable housing, whatever that looks like, we need to have these discussions about how towns who are not on sewer are going to be able to even get to where they want to be, let alone need to be under the statute. And so those discussions are ongoing. I anticipate that there will be some recommendations by this commission in January, so that the new legislature in the 2023 session can really take a deeper dive into this. And so I know it'll be a topic of discussion.
Okay. Let's move on to the one thing that you are probably most, from my perspective, attacked on is the standard attack on most Democrats who voted for the police bill. And we'll call it police accountability, whatever you want to call it. Do you feel that bill has had its intended, that it's fulfilled its purpose? Do you feel we're safer because of that bill? Are police more accountable? Has it been a positive move overall for the state to pass that bill?
I think just like any piece of legislation, it's probably going to shift and change. It already has since we passed that bill in 2020. It was, a huge process, a huge undertaking. I did not take that vote lightly. I've been very public about this. there was a lot of grief over that bill, to put it mildly. My business suffered as a result. I personally took a lot of flack for it, but I do not take pieces of legislation, any piece of legislation, lightly, let alone pieces of legislation that deal with our law enforcement officers, who I hold in very high regard. I worked very closely with a lot of police officers across the district, our police chiefs. I knew where they were on the bill, what they wanted to see changed. Initial pieces of the bill removed qualified immunity altogether, and I got together with some of my colleagues to get qualified immunity put back into the legislation. And so when we passed that bill in 2020, it was not fully removed. So only under the most egregious of circumstances would qualified immunity not stand. And so, which is incredibly rare. Thankfully, it's incredibly rare, right? Because we have a lot of good police officers who are very brave, going out there day in and day out, risking their lives to save ours. So I'm incredibly appreciative of them. People say all the time, Cohen wants to defund the police. Nothing could be farther from the truth. In fact, if you look at my voting record, you'd see that, in fact, it's quite the opposite. I voted for police raises. I have voted for police safety facilities. I worked tirelessly, in fact, with some of our local police right in Brantford on crisis intervention training. It was one of my passions since I came into office, and we finally passed in a bipartisan manner. By the way, I worked very hard with Representative Howard, who is from the Stonington area. He's also a police officer, also very passionate about crisis intervention training. We teamed up. We were able to get funding. Brantford, by the way, is really a model station. So I worked at length with the chief, as well as some of the officers, to determine what would work, what is needed. We still need to do more, but I was pleased to get some funding in the last budget for crisis intervention training, PTSD. I mean, I can go on and on. I really, it's very hard to convince people, because they're listening to some of the rhetoric around the police accountability bill. But I do hold our law enforcement officers in very high regard, and I hope to work with them in the future. I work with them all the time, and sort of keep a pulse on things. And yes, like I said, sometimes bills need to be modified. I was able to get one of our local police chiefs in the 12th district appointed to a committee that is looking at this bill very hard and determining, sort of combing through, determining what tweaks need to be made, if any, and how to move forward. And so, I was also one of the people that voted, to put the use of force piece on hold. And so we did that in the 2021 session, I believe. In this past session, we made other tweaks. So I do think it's important, that we all work together. We worked together, on some anti-crime bills in this past session, and just really want to continue in that vein.
No, and I'm be honest with you, some of the complaints I've heard still come from police officers. And the mentality is that it's put, they think twice sometimes before doing something when they should possibly be working on instinct.
Yeah.
And the negative, the thought process that it was a knee-jerk reaction to the Black Lives Matter movement or other things that were happening. I don't think anybody questions your support for the police, but that bill has become kind of the bellwether mark of whether people support police or not. Unfairly, obviously, but that's been the centerpiece there.
And I think, Steve, to be honest with you, I think it's really important that we listen to those comments from police in particular, about what they're seeing out there, what they're feeling. If they are feeling that way, is it putting them in danger? That's something very serious we need to talk about and figure out how to move forward. So I hope we can continue collaborating and with open lines of communication so that we can get it right.
Okay. I'll throw you a little red meat here just because it's a topic that I've asked everybody else about. Obviously, abortion is a big issue and a woman's right to choose. I think we know the answer to this, but I could go a step further with Democrats and say, would you support a constitutional amendment?
I would. Okay. Yeah, unequivocally.
I'm shocked by that. I'm blown away. Did not expect that to happen. But
Yeah, I mean, it's very important to me. I am the mother of two daughters as well. I just do not believe that there should be government intervention in decisions, when it comes to our reproductive health care. I really believe that's between a woman and her physician, I support a woman's right to choose.
So I know you're on some key committees, and very often we have elected officials that have been incumbents and said, well, that's not my committee and that's not the thing I'm focused on. But your district has needs that are expand beyond just your committee. And the question is moving forward this term on your third term now. So you have a little bit of in the Senate, you're larger fish, which is helpful, smaller number of people. It's on your third term. Are there priorities going into this session should you be elected or reelected? Are there laws you want to pass? Are there proposals you want to make going forward?
Yeah, well, thanks for the question. And, in the Senate, because there are fewer numbers, we also serve on more committees. So I'm Senate Chair of the Environment Committee, but I'm also Vice Chair of the Commerce Committee, and I'm seated on Finance, Revenue, and Bonding, which is, part,
the big one.
responsible for half the budget, right? As well as children and aging. So I think that gives me a really good breadth of the issues, which is great. But even if I'm not on a committee, I work so closely with my colleagues. We're obviously passing legislation that crosses all committees. And so it's important for us to know about what's going on. I've passed legislation, in a manner that wasn't on my committee at all, but worked very closely with the leads of that committee in order to get something into the chambers and finally across the finish line. I'd say my priority on the environment certainly remains the same. I'm dedicated to environmental issues, and I think climate change is really the biggest issue that we're all facing. It's an existential issue, and I think we really need to continue to have our nose to the grindstone on it and do what we can. I also, I'm a small business owner, so I want to see us grow our economy, doing everything we can to help small business grow and thrive. I really believe they're the backbone of our economy, and without small business, we're sunk. So we need to do whatever we can to get folks to think about opening up shop here in Connecticut. And once they do, how are we helping them survive? Because it's difficult everywhere to get a business off the ground. And we want to make sure that it's a little bit easier in Connecticut. So regulatory burdens, that sort of thing, I'm always looking to relieve. Taxation. What can we do to make things just a little bit easier, especially in these days, because just like everybody else, I'm feeling inflationary pressures as well, associated with not only, a family of five, but a small business. So that's incredibly important to me. And I think we get there by maintaining our fiscal responsibility, right? I'm really proud of the budget and the work that we've been able to pass. We've paid down almost $6 billion in long-term pension debt that was decades in the making, both sides of the aisle to blame. As a result of that, we're looking at it's about 440.
Oh, she froze just when I was going to ask her a question. All right, we lost her. I do want to ask her about the one-time funding.
On top of it, we have further. Are you losing me?
Yeah, I'm losing you a little bit. Let me ask you, while we talk about the budget for a second, because we lost her. Hold on. You there?
Yes.
Okay. So while we talk about the budget, one of the issues is a lot of money came in from the federal government due to COVID. We've had a lot of people come into the state. So a couple of years of increased tax revenues, that may not always be the case.
Right.
Yep. How do we keep those numbers going forward then? It's one thing to talk about, wow, we have all this money. That's great. But we know it's not necessarily things that we did. It's a pandemic that we went through and that resulted in some of those things. How do we keep that going?
Sure. And obviously capital gains were high, for a period. So, but that's why it's so important that we have that maxed out rainy day fund, so that should we be headed towards a recession, and I know the jury's still out on that, and, God forbid it happens, we will not have to go back to our taxpayers.
We may be in one, by the way. The numbers, I mean, It might be.
Well, the economy grew. The economy grew.
I saw the report this week. I did see the report. That's
huge,
true. Yeah.
But there was some growth. There's been growth in Connecticut as well. And we are, on the small business front, I will say we've seen the highest number of new business applications. So that's exciting news. So we need to keep up this momentum. And I think that's how we do it, right? When we're having a surplus, giving back to our taxpayers, making sure that we are paying down that long-term debt. So we're not struggling going forward. So it's all about fiscal responsibility to me, and maintaining that responsibility so that we can give back, and then we know that in turn our economy grows here in the state. So I'm hoping that we can do that.
Okay, so give me your elevator pitch. Give me your why should Christine Cohen be back in office for another 2 years?
Well, there's still so much more to be done. Like I said, matters pertaining to the environment, a huge issue of mine, and I want to continue the good work we've done. We just passed the Clean Air Act, which was really exciting, a collaboration between the transportation and environment committees, and I think there's much more to be done there. Transportation infrastructure, we've talked about it today. Connectivity, really important that we get some work done on that as well, increasing our train service, our bus service, and getting people to and from where they need to go with ease and in an affordable manner. So we'll be working on that. Affordable healthcare, something that you just heard, passion of yours, but certainly a passion of mine, and something I hear about consistently on the doors when I'm with constituents. And so we'll be working on that, as well as things we've talked about today, like protecting reproductive health care, public safety. And those things are incredibly important to me because they're incredibly important to my constituents. So I'll just be listening a lot. Should I be reelected? It's what I've done, in the 4 years. I pride myself on that, being able to take, constituent problems and change them into solutions for the greater good. So I'm looking forward to getting back up to Hartford and serving all the people of the 12th.
Okay. Christine, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. Enjoy the next, what do you got? 2 weeks to go. I mean, I'm sure they're going to be the 2 weeks.
Less than 2 weeks, yeah. Yep, November 8th. Go out and vote.
But thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. And we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Be well.
Thanks. All right.
Bye-bye.
All right. So thank you for Christine to come on. It's interesting. You have an election where you people who've been, we don't have, outside of the Moira, I forgot what that election that is. You have people, incumbents versus challengers. So you have people who have been in there for a while. And it's always interesting because they're attacked from a challenger who will throw a lot at them, rightfully, wrongfully. And when you know the inside baseball stuff, it's kind of hard to respond sometimes. Like, wait a minute, that's not what happens. And what happens up in Hartford is a lot more intricate than just walking up there yelling and screaming and voting a certain way. There's a lot of negotiation that happens. And the problem is every bill, multiple different people are sitting around the table with their own views and impacts that changes their life and impacts them. So it's not quite as easy as a lot of the things we see in mailers and flyers and in TV commercials. So interesting to get some of that perspective. And yes, healthcare is a massive thing for me. If anybody who watches this podcast knows that. I am tired of hearing it be a political issue. It is an economic issue. It can drastically change our economy when people have the ability to leave a job and start a business, to take a job somewhere else. It drastically gives small businesses a massive leveling playing field when it comes to dealing with larger companies and fighting for talent. Because right now, small businesses cannot fight for talent. They can't get it. They can offer the same amount of money. They can offer more money. When someone's offering healthcare and the healthcare costs are $30,000, $40,000 in benefits, it's impossible for them to compete. It's an economic issue. It needs to be looked at as an economic issue. And I hope our state can take that viewpoint at some time soon. It doesn't make sense to me. An insurance company says we can't add more people to a public option. Well, what if we suddenly hired 1 million more people? Let's just pretend we just hired everybody in the state. Everybody gets on the public option and we solve that problem. So go to the insurance companies, write a letter. And I'm tired of this argument. We'll have another podcast about that another day. But thank you, Christine, for coming on. That concludes our interviews, unless we do have the gentleman in the 98th. I forget names sometimes. It's not personal. I apologize. It's not. I'm not purposely forgetting anybody's name. Sometimes I just lose it when I'm talking. So that said, it's Thursday. It's our final podcast of the week. We should be back on Monday. There's a chance I won't be around next week. I'm not sure yet, but I'll do my best. If we're around, we'll be on Monday. And if I'm not, I will post something on Brantford 7. Guys, have a great weekend. Enjoy your evening, and I will